Bitcoin was like the missing puzzle piece that just fell into place to support this massive global transformation that I was already aware of, that we were on the brink of, and that we are now in right now. I think if I were in my 20s or 30s, I would be, 140% in Bitcoin. The rocket's about to take off. So I had an event that happened to me, and it just took everything that I knew to be true and just rug pulled it. And all of a sudden I was in this space where I've been looking at it from a pretty different perspective and really looking at Bitcoin as a change agent for growth at all levels, out there in the world, but also internally. We're kind of at the tipping point into this whole other way of inhabiting divine consciousness in a physical form. I know it's pretty far out there for a Bitcoin podcast, but like, what the heck? This is what I'm about. So there you go.
Today, I'm excited to welcome Holly Berkley to the podcast. Holly is a Bitcoin advisor, author, speaker, seasoned personal growth facilitator, ex-tech finance exec, Bitcoin maxi, and a consciousness and metaphysics explorer. Welcome to the Bitcoin Edge, Holly.
Thank you, Paul. I'm really happy to be here with you.
It's great to see you. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your Bitcoin journey.
Oh my goodness, it's been quite a journey. I like to say that I'm interested in kind of exploring a significantly different aspect or perspective than the normal Bitcoin guest, because, most folks are talking about the financial aspect of Bitcoin and price predictions number go up, especially these days. Where are we now? Over 95. Yay. And, what's happening with global adoption and all that kind of stuff. Have been looking at it from a pretty different perspective and really looking at Bitcoin as a change agent for growth at all levels, out there in the world, but also internally. Many people have experienced that moment that changed everything, that realization of what Bitcoin is and what it means for you personally and for the planet. And for a lot of folks, that really shifts them internally into low time preference and, gaining a lot of clarity and making new choices around their health and their lifestyle and relationships and family and education and community and tribe, and realizing kind of the importance of personal sovereignty at every level. I came to this realization from a slightly different trajectory, because I'd been red or orange pilled a couple of times in my life. And way back when I was in corporate America, as you mentioned, had done a lot of tech work on Wall Street, headed up at that time, which was like the hottest new computer company, Sun Microsystems. I opened their office on Wall Street as head of tech support, and my last corporate job was director of corporate technology strategy for American Express, covering the 5 business units. And prior to that, I'd even done some fixed income arbitrage trading on Wall Street and got my Series 7, all that fun kind of stuff. So, really hardcore career woman, briefcase, heels, the whole deal, And I had an event that happened to me that just kind of, I call it my reality rug pull. We talk about rug pulls, and it just took everything that I knew to be true and just rug pulled it. And all of a sudden I was in this space where everything that I thought I knew to be true just dissolved. It's like, oh, that's not true. That's not true. Well, if that's not true, then what's all this other stuff? Through that experience, I woke up to this, had this awakening, woke up to the awareness that, what is reality? That everything is energy, that we are spiritual beings having, a human experience, and that we are much, much larger than this 3-dimensional human experience. And after I'd had that experience, it kind of like opened up my barn doors of like, what is it? Aldous Huxley, the doors of perception, clearing off the stuff that's on the window. You can see through things very, very clearly. And I couldn't continue in my corporate job doing like 5-year technology strategy forecasts impacting the bottom line. It's like, I didn't care anymore. So I started exploring a whole bunch of other stuff of, going to meditation retreats and studying, various energetic modalities, Reiki and, all sorts of stuff. And that's really been the focus of my, past few decades, is, as you mentioned, being a facilitator for deep personal growth for entrepreneurs and business leaders through a private consulting practice, employing advanced bioenergetic therapies of various sorts, and for my own self, exploring spirituality and consciousness and metaphysics at very different levels. That route led me way far out beyond the leading edge of the normal 3D reality paradigm. And, how Bitcoin comes into that is I got introduced to Bitcoin in 2017 by a friend of mine, a painter, and she was exploring all these, altcoins and various things, and talked about Bitcoin. And I'm like, yeah, yeah, yeah. It's just a bunch of like internet funny money, weird stuff. I know what money is. I've been in tech. I've been in finance. I know what money is. And I totally discounted it, of course, and I just ignored it, for a couple of years. And then in 21, I heard the Michael Saylor Ross Stevens interview. Just it's an hour-long interview. It's not a long one. And Saylor was doing the Bitcoin for Corporations conference, and Ross Stevens is phenomenal, head of Stone Ridge. They've got over 20 billion in investments. He's executive chair of NIDIG, New York Digital Investment Group. And that just woke me up to what Bitcoin really was. Like suddenly all of the pieces just fell into place. And I got this very strong intuitive hit of what Bitcoin was and where it was going. And I got the technical, the financial, and the energetic spiritual aspects of Bitcoin and the role it was going to play in this massive global shift that was emerging that I've been tracking for a number of years. So I didn't have a lot of people come to Bitcoin and they have that big awakening. It's like, oh my God, Bitcoin. And it gives them that clarity about all these other things. I'd had that clarity for a number of years, and Bitcoin was like the missing puzzle piece that just fell into place to support this massive global transformation that I was already aware of, that we were on the brink of, and that we are now in right now. So it was like my second orange pill. They had the red pill of out of corporate world, and here was the orange pill of there's the piece that was missing, that feeling of. So I kind of came at it, backwards, came into Bitcoin backwards, and many of the realizations that Bitcoiners have following their orange pill moment, I had, via that event a couple decades prior. So, I had been living my life from this clarity, this awareness for a while, and I'm still learning, releasing old patterns, growing an understanding of how the cosmos is evolving. But I've basically been on that path for quite a while. So discovering Bitcoin was like the capstone rather than the door opening. It was like a mini orange pill experience. And of course, like anyone else, since that event in January, I think it was January of 21, I've read a stack of books, hundreds, thousands of hours of podcasts at this point, hundreds of hours in Clubhouse, because everybody was in Clubhouse then, and developed an online course called Bitcoin Curious, for total newbies. And then a year and a half ago, I was invited to join the Bitcoin Advisor, which is just a wonderful firm founded by Peter Dunworth, who's got 20 years of financial management, high net worth, and family office experience. And we've got 40 global advisors around the world helping people purchase and manage and secure their Bitcoin, get it off exchanges, eliminate themselves as the single point of failure, using a multi-sig collaborative custody and estate planning and tax strategies and such. So that kind of brings me up to, where we are now-ish.
I interviewed Peter last week, and yes, he was wonderful.
He's brilliant. He's just brilliant. And he's so experienced and so articulate about where we are and, what's coming. And I just love being able to pull him into client sessions, with prospects and whatnot. And he just, I never fail to learn something listening to him. He's just remarkable.
And on that note, a lot of people come into Bitcoin for number go up, but your journey wasn't the same. You didn't come in for number go up, but it does bring a lot of people in.
Absolutely. It does. I mean, that's the whole idea of having financial sovereignty and having savings mean something and not having to fight to invest to, beat inflation. Being able to realize financial sovereignty opens up the doors to all sorts of things. It opens up the doors to being able to explore how do I really want to use the time in my life? How do I want to use my creativity? What can I offer to the world? And I'm not just on the hamster wheel struggling to keep more dollars, and just beat inflation. It's going to change everything in terms of our whole social fabric construct.
And It's just funny that you came from the fintech area and the finance area. And, a lot of people go into the ETFs and into MicroStrategy. And now we have a new one with Jack Mallers.
Mhm.
And I suppose that's the start of their journey also. And then they start to realize that that can be co opted too eventually, and that self sovereignty is really the way to go.
Right, and it's a wonderful stepping stone, especially for, folks who are perhaps a little bit older and they feel much more comfortable doing something that's very familiar. Someone else is managing it for them, someone else has the responsibility for it, they have exposure to it, and they feel much more comfortable with that. Because having sole custody of a bearer asset, we've never had that. That's such a huge paradigm shift for us, and it can be terrifying when we're used to people holding our gold paper or our stocks, equities, mortgages, whatever. We're not used to having something in our own hands and having responsibility for that. And it really kind of comes down to we're not used to having sovereignty over our lives in many, many regards, especially the financial one. So I think ETFs are a great way for people to kind of get their feet wet if they're not, comfortable with actually owning it. And I absolutely encourage people to own it. I mean, that whole, you just have exposure to the price. You don't actually own Bitcoin if you're in an ETF. That may be enough for some folks, but it's a wonderful, stepping stone learning vehicle. They get in there, they start to get more educated, they realize what it means to actually physically hold a bearer asset, and with enough help and support, of yes, you can do that. Yes, I was listening to a podcast yesterday and they were talking about we've learned how to drive cars, we've learned how to operate computers or, iPhones for goodness sakes. Taking custody of your Bitcoin is not unsurmountable. It's like you can do this. And that's part of what we do at the Bitcoin Advisor. I mean, we have OGs that come in with big stacks and they realize, oh my goodness, I really need to protect this. Single sig is just not enough. But we have total newbies that come in and they want to be in this, but they have no idea where to start and they want some hand holding. And we do that. And to do it in a way that's educational, that makes them comfortable, and create a structure that makes it a safe process for them.
Yeah, it's a wonderful service. Do you also still invest in the financial markets, or are you completely on the Bitcoin journey?
That's a really good question. Um, I think if I were in my 20s or 30s, I would be, 140% in Bitcoin. Right now, I'm probably, 70, 80%, and I have some equities, but a lot of those equities are Bitcoin proxies. They're mining companies, they're, MSTR, they're, whatever's. Uh, and then I have a little bit of just regular equities I have a very wonderful Bitcoin conscious financial advisor, and we call it this barbell strategy. And I think I've kind of shifted the barbell even more into Bitcoin, because he wanted to have a little, based on where I am in my life cycle. I'm not at the beginning. I'm kind of, further down that runway. But it's mostly, and even just recently, I took another chunk and converted it over because I'm just looking at the demand that's coming for Bitcoin, and I'm like, I'm going to be silly if I'm sitting there in Warren Buffett related things just to kind of, protect me from a potential downswing when the rocket's about to take off. So yeah, I'm mostly in Bitcoin or Bitcoin adjacent investments. Yeah.
Yeah, me too. And the reason I always ask this is I mentioned to you before I'm interviewing Jeff Booth next week, and he says that when we invest in the financial markets and the
Mhm.
stock market, we're actually making that system stronger because he has a very strong belief that only Bitcoin protocol, and that's obviously down the road, is going to survive. I am working on getting closer that way, but I know a lot of people have some retirement accounts and there's money there you can't just sell. So it is at the moment good to have the option to have the ETFs and the proxy.
Yeah, for 401ks that you can't adjust as much what's in there. ETFs are great in there. I have a lot of clients who had IRAs and they didn't realize they could have Bitcoin in their IRAs. And that was a revelation to them because they thought I have to find extra cash to put into Bitcoin and my IRA is separate. And like, no, 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 you can have Bitcoin in your IRA. And their head explodes and like, you're kidding me. You know, tax protected, Roth IRA with Bitcoin in it is like one of the best things around. 401ks are a little different. You don't have quite as much control over that, but self-directed IRAs, absolutely.
Yeah, some good options. So when I asked you to come on, you mentioned that you were a different type of advisor, and that's partly because of your journey with exploring consciousness and metaphysics. So tell us about that journey and how that fits into all of this.
Oh my goodness. Where do I start on that? Let's see. It has been quite a journey. It's been, several decades that I've been going down that particular rabbit hole. And where we are now, one of the things I've been really tracking over the last number of years is this idea that this massive global transformation was coming. Many, many spiritual leaders, past and present, have described this time of a great awakening of the consciousness of humanity, and that it's coming, and we need to be clearing out any of the residue, old patterns and beliefs and things that are in our way that are holding us back. And I people call me a tracker because I kind of pull in information from many different sources, but it's consistently all of them are saying it's not coming, it's here, it's now. And that's part of, what how Bitcoin is kind of relating right into this. I mean, we're at the end of a number of significant time cycles that have reached completion simultaneously, which is extremely unusual. And so we are starting, a number of new cycles. We're moving from, just from an astrological point of view, from, Pluto and Capricorn, which is about top down structures and inequality and power over, into Pluto into Aquarius. And, we're moving from um, elites having power over individuals, severe financial and human rights inequalities, separation, division, manipulation, all that kind of stuff, into a really different higher octave of consciousness, and much more. And people are starting to feel this, and I'm seeing it a lot in the Bitcoin community. This desire for cooperation, collaboration, power to the individual, personal sovereignty, transparency, all of these qualities that you see so much embodied in the Bitcoin community are also being recognized as important personally, important in the social fabric out there. So we're returning to our true nature as energetic co-creators in this world, and seeing a shift to a reality where thought and intention and consciousness drive everything, and coming together as humanity in unity consciousness. Some of the other things that we're going to see in this time period that are coming up. This Pluto in Aquarius is going to be for the next 18 years. So we're going to, it's going to be a significant period of time. And we'll also see breakthroughs in science and technology and aviation and genetics and healing technologies and plasma physics and energy systems, free energy systems, things like that. Um, and what I'm hearing from a number of different sources is we'll even see greater recognition of and contact with non-human entities, with our galactic family. And you're starting to see documentation that they've been around for a while, but it's been suppressed by various governmental, whatevers. And so they've been here. I mean, this is not new, but there will be more conscious and aware contact. So we're shifting from a limited mind focus into the wisdom of heart awareness. And all of these qualities totally align with Bitcoin, and the values and the qualities that Bitcoin represents and embodies: decentralized equality, individual sovereignty, global, borderless truth, transparency. All of these aspects of Bitcoin are totally aligned with where we're headed in this new consciousness, this new golden age of consciousness, if you want to call it that. And it's, the idea of Bitcoin as being a neutral global money enables and promotes, borderless cooperation and peace and unity consciousness, a global unity consciousness. So they're totally aligned. And I just love seeing all these pieces kind of coming together, instead of being floating out there separately. It's like, oh, that's how that fits together, and we're heading in that direction.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. It seems like to many of us that Bitcoin adoption is slow, but it really is quite quick compared to even the internet, right?
So, yeah, and to your point, I mean, one of the things about this time is we're going to see things. This is not going to be a linear process, and people have talked about, gradually and suddenly, like the hockey stick, for Bitcoin. It's the same thing in this massive global shift of consciousness, this elevation of consciousness. It's like slow, 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 very fast, and not linear. sudden shifts, sudden awarenesses. There's even talk about a particular event that will happen if you want to be really out there on the edge of, woo-woo stuff, about a particular wave of energy that will come over the planet from, a galactic sun source that will, over the space of a couple days, elevate the awareness and consciousness of everyone on the planet simultaneously. So we're talking about a really big upgrade, not linear, but just vroom, over the space of just a couple days. So there are some really interesting things coming down the pike for us.
That is very interesting because, just on that note, on a spiritual level of the planet, it seems like there isn't that much awareness in the general population. But what you're saying is it is increasing, and then
Mhm.
we'll get a natural bump up. I mean, I
Right.
think everyone has a different idea of what spirituality is, but
Absolutely. And everybody's at a different place in their journey and their understanding and their awareness. But even for instance, people who are in more traditional, religions, even they might experience a sense of, that sense of unity consciousness of Christed connection and peace, for instance, the peace with, I never can say this, the peace which passeth all understanding. If they're embodying that, even in a traditional religious paradigm, it's still going to up level them too. So they don't have to move into, we're spiritual beings having, a human experience and consciousness. Even just within the particular paradigm, it could move them into a place of more awareness and more connection and collaboration and compassion for everyone else around them.
that sounds like a better world to me.
Absolutely. I'm excited about it. A while back, I was kind of I was hearing this is where we're headed, and there was a part of me was going, "How are we gonna get there? There's so much division, there's so much anger, there's so much, war and control and power and all these things." Bitcoin is going to play a part in that, like a foundational financial sovereignty part. And as I said before, when you have financial sovereignty, it shifts the fabric, of society. When people don't have to worry about, scrabbling for every penny, it shifts where their focus is. It's almost like back in the 1400s when you had the Medicis and you had the Renaissance and, there was money stability. And so you had this huge increase in artists and creativity and, all of the blossoming of the amazing artists like Leonardo and Michelangelo and Raphael and, all these amazing artists. So we may see a whole shift in creativity blossoming when people aren't, on the hamster wheel.
Yeah, I know it's definitely changed things for me. One of my guests said that Bitcoin isn't just a technology, it's a
Mhm.
spiritual nudge, a silent invitation to exit the illusion and re enter alignment.
Yes,
N-
exactly.
Nice way to put it.
And when I said back at the beginning that like Bitcoin is a change agent for growth at all levels, that's exactly, what you're saying right there. It is a change agent. It's not just financial.
But how do people get there? They start with the financial and then they start going down the rabbit hole.
And they start going down the rabbit hole of personal sovereignty and taking, having that inner awareness of what are my priorities, what are my values, a longer time frame, and realizing that they don't want to just buy stuff to have it, and so they're only purchasing things that have meaning and value in the longer term, shifting their priorities and values around their health and relationships and family and connection to community and all of these things. So Bitcoin has been a catalyst for a lot of kind of greater personal internal awareness and growth around those levels.
And what are some of the biggest changes that you've seen since you adopted Bitcoin?
I've seen it more in others. Like I said, because I had kind of been on this path for a long time and had made a bunch of those changes for myself a number of years ago. So I've been living in a much more minimal way, valuing experiences over things, valuing relationships over things for a really long time. I mean, probably the biggest one for me is the sense of financial freedom and just knowing that, like, that's taken care of, you know? And so there's this inner, spaciousness and relaxation that's, come for me around that. I don't have to be as focused on, what that aspect of my life looks like, which means I can devote more time and energy to other things that are more important.
Do you think for most people, in order to really get Bitcoin and understand it, that they need to have a spiritual shift?
I think it's a chicken and egg thing. If you already have like a spiritual basis, then Bitcoin opens that door even more. If you don't have one, then Bitcoin can kind of initially open that door. You don't have to have a spiritual, but it will frequently open that door for you into, the sense of there's something greater here. And, we're really moving into a time of greater cooperation and collaboration, unity consciousness. And I know I was feeling this a couple of years ago. I've been in, a solo private practice for many years. And a couple of years ago, I was really feeling this pull to work more collaboratively. I really wanted to be working, in group kinds of things, not me doing group therapy, but like working in collaboration with others. And I got a call out of the blue. It's never out of the blue. I love these synchronicities, right? From a woman who said, "Do you do like trauma work?" I said to her, "Yeah, kind of all day long, every day, because a lot of what I do," we were talking about this, before we started, but a lot of what I do is people will come with a particular difficulty they're having in their behavior or a strategy, something that's not working in their life. And one of the things I'm really good at is the kind of the treasure hunt down to the source of where's that coming from? And it might be something that happened to them, in third grade that's impacting their capacity to be comfortable giving a shareholder talk, right? So a lot of those things are based on trauma. Trauma forms a belief. We sort for things that confirm beliefs and we discount things that don't. So that belief gets reinforced over time. And here we are doing a behavior and a strategy that's no longer working for us. So a lot of what I deal with at the core is something that happened that was traumatic to us way back when. So clearing that from the system. So I said to her, yeah, I do that a lot. People don't come saying I have trauma, but that's kind of what we're dealing with at the core. She said, and we had scheduled like a half an hour call. 2 hours later, she's like, "I have these events that I run 4 times a year. We get 30 people in a house. We do very intense, deep, deep work. I think we need you as our trauma person to come and help with this belief change work." And I'm like, "Sign me up." So I'd been wanting this, and the universe said, "We can help you with that." And it just dropped this right into my lap. And for the past 4 years, yeah, I've been working quarterly with her and another group. It's about 50-50 facilitators and clients, doing this work in a big house, right? 4 times a year. And I didn't have to create it. I didn't have to set it up. I just show up, do the work. But I get to work with phenomenal other facilitators, and we're all very complementary to each other in service of the clients that are there. So it's like, and this comes back around to, we are like little radio stations sending out, quantum signals, right? Our frequency, what we desire, not what we think, but, the feeling that we have of, and I had been wanting to be in a collaborative environment. And the universe said, we can make that happen for you, and drop this beautiful opportunity that's been ongoing into my lap. So being conscious of what we are conscious and clear of what we are wanting, what we are wanting in our life, and the universe will just align and drop it in if there's nothing that's kind of impeding it. I mean, the fun example is, I want a red car. I want a red, sports car, but I could never afford it, and my wife wouldn't want it, and it wouldn't fit in the garage, and that just cancels it. But if you're really clear about, I want that red sports car, the thing will show up somehow, some way. So we just have to be really clear about the signal we're sending out. And I love all those synchronicities and wonderful things when we are aligned with spirit, God, the quantum energy field, the field of pure positive potential. Magic happens.
That you manifested exactly what you wanted, what you put out into the universe, and that is how the world works. Before I found Bitcoin, I started learning about that because I realized I was pushing money away, and
Yeah.
that
Oh, yeah.
was from
Yeah.
my childhood. But I was getting mixed messages, and I had to relearn, kind of like you said. And I used to talk about this for Bitcoiners because you have to believe you deserve it
Mhm.
before you're going to actually manifest it. Because in places like Africa, a lot of people just don't have extra to put into Bitcoin. So
Right.
you've got to get your mindset right before you start manifesting the life you want. It
Totally.
is quite a long journey.
And you can't manifest the life you want from a place of all the reasons why you can't have it, whether it be money or, prosperity or, a loving relationship or whatever. If you're sending out a mixed signal, or actually, let me back up a second. The universe in all of its loving, gracious capacity will always match what you are sending out.
Yes.
And it's just as simple as that. And so you have to be really clear about what you're sending out. And if you're sending out either something that you don't want, something you don't prefer, or a mixed, muddy signal, that's what it will give you back. And so, to your thing about, deserving prosperity and being comfortable with having it, being comfortable with receiving it. I used to do this fun process with folks when we were working with money issues. And I would put a piece of paper that said, here's $100 and put it on their body. And they'd say, yep, that's comfortable. We do muscle testing. Are they in alignment with that? Yes. I'd put one that said $10,000. Are they in alignment with that? Yeah. I put $100,000 and they just went, whoop. It's like, I don't deserve that. And then we would see where their level was of what they felt like they could deserve and start to clear that. So we could put $1 million on there and they'd go, bring it in. I am like ready. Because it wasn't bumping up against the beliefs of I don't deserve it, or money, it's a struggle, it doesn't grow on trees, no pain, no gain, all those kinds of beliefs that people have that are in their way. And sometimes they don't even realize they're there, that are impeding them from having the flow of whatever it be, money, prosperity, relationship, love, health, whatever it be.
Yeah, I love that. I love that reminder. And I also love that you mentioned it's the feeling you have, because I always remember the the secret, and they used to say, if you want the red car, see yourself in it.
There you
But
go.
it's not enough to see yourself in it. You
You have to
really
feel
got to
it.
walk it and feel it.
There's a wonderful thing that most people aren't aware of. Thoughts are electrical and emotions are magnetic. Electromagnetic. You put it together, and that's the signal you're sending out. But you could be sending out an electrical signal, but it's the feeling place that creates the magnet part of it that pulls things back in. So you can have a thought of I deserve this. You can have all the affirmations you want, but if you're not feeling it, it's not in alignment with who you are. You're not sending out the thing that's going to pull it back into you. That are going to be the quantum fit, the quantum alignment. So thoughts are electrical, emotions are magnetic, electromagnetic signal.
How do you bring Bitcoin into your work? Do you bring it?
I orange peel everybody. I mean, there's that. I mean, even my dog has it like has a Bitcoin collar, So I'm out walking around. People are like, what's that? Why is he? What's that mean? Take every opportunity. Um, yeah, and it depends on where someone is, of course. If they're dealing with, I had a couple clients, and they were dealing with some financial because there's a lot of chaos right now. There's a lot of turbulence in the world, and some people's um, financial income is being threatened, and they're feeling afraid. So just educating them about money, about Bitcoin, can be a way to open up a door for them to financial stability and freedom. So, if it's appropriate, I will drop that in to current, conversations. But I mean, I was having a conversation with the manager of the gym that I go to, and, because I was wearing a Bitcoin t-shirt, and he said, do you know about Bitcoin? And I'm like, yeah, are you familiar with it? He's a little short guy, a little pudgy, probably in his 60s, not anyone. He's like, yeah, I got a couple. I'm like, really? Awesome. I would never have expected him, right? To have them, but he did. He said, yeah, this guy, suggested I get him way back when. I got him. I've never touched him. I'm like, good for you. That is so great. Hold on to him. Don't touch him. You're doing great. But you never know. I mean, I was orange pilling the barista, in the coffee shop the other day. It's not just in my work, the image I've been using recently, and I've always used it in my work, is like lighthouses don't run around the island looking for ships to save. They just stand there and send out the signal. And if ship needs to see it, it comes in on it. I feel that way about Bitcoin. I just stand there and I just put out little Bitcoin vibes. And if someone says, what's that? It's like, and I just, mixing metaphors here, plant seeds, or give them a little bit of light on what Bitcoin is. And if they take up on that, great, we go further. But it's so important, and I know this, is to meet someone where they are, to just, if you're planting seeds, meet them where they are. Don Bay talks about this, who does a lot of work with, unions and pension funds and all those guys. Really, it's so important to meet someone where they are and not try and, come in at this level and they're just, forget it.
So when you say meet them where they are, if inflation's affecting them, or if they're disappointed with the current system, you meet them there.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. I mean, I was talking to someone, I can't remember where I was, And, they asked me about it and I said, well, are you being impacted by inflation? Is that a concern for you? And that was kind of an entry point. And they got to talk about, what that had done and how it had negatively impacted their life and to tell me their story. And then we could go from there. Exactly.
Do you think everything is downstream of money in a way?
I think everything's downstream of consciousness. You know, it's like, and money is one construct that we're dealing with from a limited perspective of consciousness into a greater, higher level of consciousness. Bitcoin is one of the things that's in alignment with that upgrade in consciousness, if you will. So to me, consciousness is the underlying frequency of the universe downstream of that.
Yeah, that's a good point. In Seb Bunny's book, I don't know if you've read it, but he says everything is downstream of money. And I asked him about the spiritual side. He said, of course, and he's very spiritual.
Yep.
He said, I didn't include that in this book, but I said you would have got more women if you had. But I'm wrong. I've I have spoken to so many guys that see the spiritual side. They way deeper than me.
This is, I mean, to your point, um, I don't know if I think you saw the post. I have a pinned post, on my timeline. It said, it's time for me to come out of the closet, not that closet, but the spiritual closet, because I've been, on the Twitterverse for Bitcoin the last few years, but it's been from the financial tech side. I haven't really been talking about the spiritual side, the energetic side, consciousness, cosmos, and the things that are kind of really further out on the edge of understanding, where I've been playing and inhabiting for a long time. But I was seeing these little things popping up all over, my Twitter timeline. And I was like, okay, it's time, because I'm just seeing this everywhere. And it's time for me to kind of step forward and own who I am. And so many people are resonating with it. I'm getting all sorts of, comments back from people you would never expect. They've had these experiences, and it's part of the overall elevation of consciousness that's happening worldwide, that's happening globally. And part of what I'm seeing is that they're having individual experiences and they think they're the only one. And what I want to do is like draw it together to say, everybody's having these. You're not alone. They're like, whoa, okay, cool. Community, yay,
Yeah. Yeah, I do a spaces on the spiritual side of Bitcoin, and there are many more people interested, and they say
Yeah,
I'm more interested in this side than the money go up. And I know I have both. I have a little bit of the money go up because that's the financial security,
right.
but I know it's much deeper than that.
And people are feeling called to that deeper, aspect. I mean, we are being called at a very, very deep level to really show up to our full authenticity as spiritual beings inhabiting these human bodies in these lifetimes. That's part of what this elevation of consciousness is. And that's part of what I do at the deeper level is really, I mean, help people reveal and fully experience their true nature, their core essence, and their highest expression of their authenticity and joy beneath all of the imprints and the conditioning that they've accumulated over their whole lifetime. And when someone's able to experience themselves that way, it's clean, it's pure, it's unencumbered, it's joyful, it's expressive, it's grounded, and it's delight in connection and community. And we're seeing this in the Bitcoin community. If you look at some of these communities, Bitcoin community in general is so positive and so supportive, unlike other communities where they're, tearing each other down and negative and whatever. And it's such a joy to see that in the community, and how it's a reinforcing cycle. People are positive and generous and collaborative and supportive. And the more they are, the more free people feel to really reveal who they are. And I'm seeing this in your podcast, in Stacy's, in Mrs. Hoddle's. It's like all of these newer podcasts that are like people are just showing up fully for who they are. At Freedom Farmer the other day, showing up, in a very heart revealing way that impacted so many people. So people are showing up in their full authenticity. And that's what we're being pulled to, drawn to, compelled to, and that's part of the bigger shift that's happening. And to me, that's like my purpose, my role, if I have one here, is to help people realize their soul sovereignty. That is my purpose. That's why I'm here. The highest level of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, past self-actualization, is soul sovereignty, the ownership of yourself as that authentic spiritual being.
Soul sovereignty. Tell us a little bit more about that. What does that mean?
Um, are you familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs? Have you ever heard of that?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, cool. For listeners that might not be, what is his name? I can't remember his first name. Anyway, he was a philosopher, in the last century who came up with this hierarchy of needs, and the basic one at the very and it kind of corresponds to our chakras, our energy, centers in the body. And the very basic one is physiological needs: food, shelter, warmth, rest. And the next one is kind of safety needs of security, safety. The next higher up is belongingness, love, intimate relationships, friends, tribe. And the next one up is esteem needs, like feeling a sense of accomplishment, a sense of pride in yourself. And then the top one that he has on there is self actualization. So achieving one's full potential, creative potential, that kind of thing. And I think there's one higher than that. And that's really what soul sovereignty is after you've realized all of these others, what's left, what's your greatest, purest, most authentic connection to source, to spirit? That's soul sovereignty, really owning yourself as a spiritual being and how we are here to support and interact with other spiritual beings who happen to be inhabiting these 3D physical forms. And it's an inner awareness. So it's taking your attention from out there into in here and being what I call self-referenced. And that's not from a self-love, narcissistic love, but having that awareness of I am embodying source. I am embodying God, Christed energy, if you will. We all are. And really owning that and living your life from that place. That is soul sovereignty.
That's really cool. Yeah, and I think that brings a lot of peace when you get there.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's one of the reasons I've been using that term soul sovereignty recently, and I really love it and want to work more with that. But the name of my consulting practice is Bliss Smart. I always, it's like bliss the smart way. It doesn't have to be hard or take a long time to clear out the patterns, the stuff that's in your way so that you can really fully inhabit, connect with, have that awareness and inhabit and live your life as the fullest creative expression of that aspect of yourself. So that's why I named my company Bliss Smart, creating, and inhabiting and realizing bliss the smart way, the easy way.
That's a great name. How does health fit into that?
How does it not fit into it? Only we happen to be inhabiting these meat sacks, if you will. It's like people talk about meat space. Being in meat space, right? Like IRL in real life. There's the three-dimensional aspect of being healthy: clean food, clean water, you know, enough sleep, good supplements, staying away from processed, all that kind of real basics. But we're actually moving. This is going to be a little bit further out there on the woo-woo scale here because of the energy shifts that are happening planetarily and part of this elevation of consciousness. We are moving from being simply carbon-based life forms. We're all carbon-based, three-dimensional, into more crystalline light based life forms. So we're moving into more crystalline bodies where we will need different kinds of food, less food, not the heavier things that we're used to. And it's part of the elevation of consciousness of being able to communicate telepathically, for instance, and not have to use words and screens and typing and all these, laborious things that we do. There's health as we kind of define it now, but the health that we're moving into is going to be longer longevity. You won't have the same illnesses. You won't have the same physical decline that we have been used to experiencing. And we'll be able to live for a couple of 100 years. It's really going to shift. And we're kind of at the tipping point of moving from how we have known ourselves as human beings in three-dimensional form into this whole other way of inhabiting divine consciousness in a physical form. That's never really been done before in the universe. We've had, non-physical, like when you leave your body, non-physical awareness and divine expression. And then we've had kind of in the physical, but being able to take that and inhabit it into a physical form, full divine awareness and expression in a physical form. That's what's shifting.
Wow.
I know it's pretty far out there for a Bitcoin podcast, but like, what the heck? This is what I'm about. So
Yeah.
there you go.
Well, exactly. Being your authentic self. And but just to bring it back to health, and I don't want to I could discuss health all day, but it's really important in order to enjoy our lives. We need to be healthy. We need to be feeling good. and even to enjoy your Bitcoin. It's part of
Absolutely.
journey.
Absolutely. And this is, so many people who get into Bitcoin realize, I mean, you see all the carnivores and you see people who are doing amazing, exercise things and clearing out body fat and getting really strong and walking. I mean, who is it? Stephen Lepke, who's doing like, 20,000 steps a day, and he's outdoors all the time and sun, all the sun stuff. And there's a lot of clarity around what does it take to support this human physical, container that we're walking around in. Absolutely.
So, just to bring it back to Bitcoin, Jeff Booth says that if Bitcoin does not become a medium of exchange, it will fail as a store of value. And the reason I bring this up is I want to bring awareness to this, is that it is important for us to start thinking about using our Bitcoin, even if it's a spend and replace. How do you feel about that?
That's a really great question. And I recently read a book called Die with Zero by Bill Perkins. We have been enculturated to save, 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 save. Don't spend anything. And then when you get to retirement, then you can play and, do, do, do. But his point of view is if you judiciously spend money on life experiences as you go through life, you're going to have life fulfillment memories. It's like you're adding to your memory bank, not just your financial bank. And he gives the example of I think for his 40th birthday, he wanted to have a really big, wonderful party and he wanted to do it like at an island in the Caribbean. And there were a lot of people he wanted to invite that couldn't afford to fly down. And so he paid for the entire thing. And it was a huge expense for him, but it was one of those life experiences that was, to quote MasterCard, priceless, right? It was absolutely priceless. So his point is to be able to spend judiciously throughout your life to um, accumulate really wonderful life experiences. I mean, one of the illustrations I use with clients sometime is imagine you're 80 years old in your rocking chair on your porch looking back on your life. How do you want to have lived that life? And they go, oh, I want to have traveled more. I want to have, had more time with family members, whatever. So he's advocating, and it's not just, die with zero, no money, because absolutely for many Bitcoiners, it's generational wealth. They want to pass it on. But there's this thing in Bitcoin of, stack your sats, never spend. And I am a big proponent of Bitcoin is your savings account, and you use it for the things you would use for a savings account that are important to you. A wedding, a home at some point, a college education, whatever those things are that really have value and meaning, Bitcoin is there to be used for that and should be used for that. I think a lot of folks are still it's important to, stack every sat, and they haven't quite reached the I'm comfortable with what I have and then I can spend some and know that I have enough for my lifetime and enough to pass on to kids. But I'm a big proponent of you reach a stage where it's important to be turning it back into the Bitcoin economy. That's part of it. And adding to your life experiences, which is crucial. You don't want to get to the end and say, I stacked all my sats and I don't have any chairs in my living room. And then what? It's like, it's there to be used.
Yeah, I like that. I know that a lot of people want to leave generational wealth, and that's wonderful. But I also think it's great for kids and families to also make their own. And I could, because I have seen how much when some people get left generational wealth, how it's not appreciated. And so I always kind of question that a little bit. So I really advocate to people to definitely use what you want to use in your life. I only nieces, so I don't know exactly what it's like to have a kid. I could imagine that you want to leave everything for them, but
Well,
I have seen some negative effects of that.
absolutely. And so there are folks who are constructing trusts and wills where they have time lock things where a certain portion is available at a certain age, or they have to reach a certain, level of income that they've achieved themselves before some gets unlocked and is added to that. So there are ways to construct that. And, we're seeing that with some of our clients that want to do more complex trust schedules, where you have time locks and you have things that are dependent on other things happening before things get freed up. Exactly to your point, someone's just handed a huge fortune at age 18 or 21. They may not have the skills to really, be able to do that well. And there's that whole cycle of what is it, weak money creates weak men, that kind of thing. And we've seen this just with regular fiat money. Someone gets handed a fortune and they just blow it all and they're not uh, being a productive member of society, shall we say. So, but there are ways to structure that even with massive generational wealth that Bitcoin will be creating so that you're promoting and supporting the positive maturation of values for your kids or their kids.
I'm glad you pointed that out. And I'm also sure that most Bitcoin families will be teaching their kids these values and they'll.
But you don't know about the grandkids or the great grandkids or the,
True.
you know. So some of these, there are time locks that they're not freeing up for 50 years. I mean, there are all sorts of different ways to construct this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's been really great chatting with you, Holly. Tell us what you want to leave people with.
Um, it's been wonderful being with you too. This has really been so much fun. There's something that's kind of been on my mind, and everything can feel very chaotic right now. We're in a very, very turbulent time. 2025 is going to be extremely turbulent, and the energy can feel very scattered. Timelines feel very fluid, elastic, as the reality itself is like stretching beyond some familiar shape and all that has felt really real and solid to us. And I know some people are feeling kind of lost or not sure of even their own identity or purpose. I'm getting that, why am I here? As new versions of themselves start to become like online, that are being activated by this immense clearing that is occurring in the collective field that we've been talking about. So there are old imprints of ancient patterns and programs that we've carried in our lifetime and perhaps even for centuries. And these imprints and patterns are dissolving. And in their absence, if you drop in, there can be kind of a strange and a disorienting internal void or quiet, a sense of unfamiliarity, because those energetic templates were once our comfort zones, right? And they're deeply woven into the old dimensional realities that we've been comfortable holding and operating within. And I just want to kind of bring people's awareness that what can feel like disorientation is actually liberation. So just as Bitcoin is financial liberation, this is like soul level liberation that we're experiencing. And we're being gently guided to root into, excuse me, like a deeper kind of safety, born not of old constructs, but really sourced from within that I've been kind of referencing, that internal referencing, that internal awareness. And our nervous systems and our subtle energy bodies are expanding. They are recalibrating to hold the frequencies of this new quantum field of infinite potential, where creation begins from. And it begins from embodied presence, not programming or conditioning. So it's really creation begins from that sense of soul sovereignty. So just allowing yourself to kind of, if you're feeling a little off, if you're feeling a little disoriented, to realize that this is about um, a recalibration of your whole system, and to drop in and realize that it's energetic liberation, not just financial liberation in the Bitcoin world. So giving yourself the time, the space to drop in and find that stillness, find that quietness, to ground, go out and be barefoot on the grass, right? And especially during this turbulent time, to maintain that, what I call an observer perspective. And the image I use is like the eagle sitting on the branch, just watching things that are happening down there and going, oh, that's happening. Look at that. That's happening. But not being engaged in the drama, right? And focusing, just ignoring all the distractions in the drama and just focusing on that internal awareness and giving yourself time for that stillness and that awareness, because we are moving into that sense of spirit liberation, if you will.
I love that. And I love that reminder. I feel it. I feel something changing. And I think once you get through that little bit uncomfortable, it does feel really good.
Yes.
That's a great reminder for when you're on X and people are saying you Bitcoiners are crazy,
All right.
which they don't say too often. We have a really great community, like you said, but if those outsiders come in, yeah, just observe like the eagle.
Right. And just be in a kind of witness mode, observer mode, and not just about, what's happening in the Bitcoin community, but we're going to see a lot of, shocking truths coming to light, turbulence, divisiveness out there in the world. And just having that, it's managing your personal energy field, right? So if I could take just a minute or two more, the deeper we move into awareness and alignment that we were talking about, the more sensitive we become to the energies that no longer match our frequency. right? So during these turbulent times, sometimes it's not about expansion into all that, but like containment of our energy field, noticing what we've been kind of giving away unconsciously, our attention, our energy, our peace. So there are times when it's appropriate to kind of pull your energy back in from a place of self-honoring, of self-care, not of defensiveness, but just self-care. So we're starting to feel into and refine the edges of our personal energy fields, not as defense, but as clarity. And I want to make the point that discernment, that like perspective, discernment is a spiritual practice. Stillness is a power move. Non-engagement with all that is a form of soul sovereignty. There's a wonderful quote from Ilya Prigogine. She's a Nobel Prize winning chemist. And she says, when a complex system is far from equilibrium, and we're seeing that out there, right? Small islands of coherence, that inner stillness, that discernment, in a sea of chaos, have the capacity to shift the entire system to a higher order. So, us just finding those, pulling it in, that stillness as a power move, discernment as a spiritual practice can have a huge impact on the elevation that's happening globally.
What a beautiful place to end. I will put links to all of your X. Is there anywhere else?
I'm just the Bitcoin advisor. So if, my Bliss Smart, handle Bliss_smart for X, and then anybody can reach me if they want to, Holly at thebitcoinadvisor.com. If you go there, you can, set up an appointment if you want to, speak with me about something. I'm available through there.
Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much. This has been an absolute delight. Thanks for having me.